Hello, church. Welcome to our service for Maundy Thursday. Maundy Thursday is a part of Holy Week that traditionally recognizes the Last Supper and the message that Jesus shared with his disciples at that last meal together, the celebration of the Feast of Passover. Many traditions on this night will celebrate by having a Passover-type meal or celebrating communion. But in our tradition, we don't always do that, and tonight we will be offering a service that's more a reflective prayer service that tries to hit on the theme of what Jesus is talking about while at that meal. Maundy Thursday is short for the Latin word mandatum, which is like mandate. And on Maundy Thursday, Jesus shared with the disciples the new commandment. The new commandment is to love one another as Jesus has loved us. And when he gives the disciples that commandment, he's giving that commandment to all of us. So this evening, we will be welcoming each other into the space of reflecting on that commandment and what it means for us through trying times, through whatever times we find ourselves. So at this time, I'd like to invite you to take a deep breath, get into as peaceful and comfortable a space as possible. And I'm going to begin a series of readings that walk us through, in a narrative form, the story of that gathering of the disciples and leading up to that time of betrayal in Jesus' life. Jesus spent his life teaching us the meaning of love. Through word and deed, Jesus showed us how to love God and to love one another. He fed the hungry. He healed the sick. He invited the women and the children and the tax collectors and the sinners to come to his table. He broke bread with the least and the lost and shared the cup of redemption with them all. He crossed boundaries of race, nationality, ethnicity, gender, and class. He challenged religious authority, and he scoffed at those who were pompous. He called out the hypocrites. He admonished the scribes and the Pharisees for their hardened hearts. He brought a simple message: love God, love yourself, and love one another.
What wondrous love is this, O my soul, O my soul? What wondrous love is this, O my soul? What wondrous love is this that caused the Lord of bliss to bear the painful cross for my soul, for my soul, to bear the painful cross for my soul.
The way of Jesus goes through the cross, but we're not there yet. It's close. We can see its shadow. We can feel the cold, dark night. We know that enemies are conspiring. They have had enough of him. He threatens their comfort. He threatens their way of life. He threatens their power. They will come for him. First, though, we will gather. We gather with Jesus and his closest friends. We gather with those that called him teacher, rabbi, friend. We gather in witness to the Passover, to remember that God saved the people from slavery. God saved once. God saves forevermore.
What wondrous love is this, O my soul, O my soul? What wondrous love is this, O my soul? What wondrous love is this that caused the Lord of all to lay aside his crown for my soul, for my soul, to lay aside his crown for my soul.
While they were together, the disciples began to argue over which one would be greatest. Even here at the end, they did not seem to understand what Jesus had been teaching them all along. He reminded them that to be great in the kingdom of God meant to serve. After Jesus' talk of betrayal, the disciples' argument, and Jesus' rebuke of them, the disciples seemed to be growing anxious. Peter proclaimed, "Lord, I'm ready to go with you to prison and to death." And Jesus replied, "I tell you, Peter, the cock will not crow this day until you have denied 3 times that you know me."
To God and to the Lamb I will sing, I will sing. To God and to the Lamb I will sing. To God and to the Lamb, who is the great I am. While millions join the theme, I will sing, I will sing. While millions join the theme, I will sing.
Afterwards, Jesus led his disciples to the Garden of Gethsemane. He asked them to pray for him, for he wanted to be alone. There, Jesus prayed. He asked his friends to keep watch, but they kept falling asleep. He prayed for another way out. He prayed in anguish. He prayed as a man who knew that if he followed God's will, he would be charged, convicted, mocked, humiliated, abandoned, and nailed to the cross. Knowing all of this, still he prayed, "Not my will, but yours." When he got up from prayer, he came to the disciples and found them sleeping. "Why are you sleeping? Get up and pray that you may not come into the time of trial." For his betrayer and the time of arrest was at hand. Of course, I knew where to find him that night. I'd been there several times before. I met the centurion at the east gate, and we walked down through the valley of the Kidron, and then up toward lonely Gethsemane, the Mount of Olives. It wasn't far. He made more noise than I wanted. The armor, it rattled. When we got there, it was much as I had expected, except for one thing. The disciples. They slept. They slept. Jesus was so deep in prayer, he was surrounded before anyone realized what was going on. There was confusion at first, then fear, and then horror when they realized who it was. I went to Jesus and I said, "Greetings, Master," and I kissed him. That's what I did. Surprised? No, I wouldn't say surprised. I'd say he was more disappointed. Peter drew his sword. There was a hint of violence. James and some of the others, they dove into the bushes. But really, it was so simple and quick. We went up. I kissed him. He was bound. And we went back down toward the east gate. You never quite get over it, do you? After all these years, some 20 centuries now, you still don't know what to do with me. I am a thorn in the side of the Christian conscience. You know, once my name was common. In Judea it was honored. A firstborn son would proudly be named Judas. But now, who would name their dog Judas? Where people know my name, my story is reserved for traitors. I raise doubts and many scandalous questions, like, if Jesus was so good, how come this disciple was disloyal? Or if Jesus was so wise, how could he choose a traitor? How could I have done it? Why did I do it? Did I do it? Some Christians like to believe that Jesus knew all along that I would betray him, while others believe my betrayal was invented. After all, we need to have villains, don't we? Circumstances don't provide one, well, then you just invent one. When it comes to evil, you Christians can be so naive. How easily good is betrayed by a friend and with a kiss. We seldom talk about how much outrage Jesus caused. Well, I was never comfortable with tax collectors. Roman collaborators. They're more like your mafia than anything else. I had an easier time with the women. Jesus would sit around the table with them, with all of us, and talk all through the night. Many who followed him were from outside Torah. It's no wonder the scribes would ask us constantly, why? Why do you eat with traitors and with prostitutes? We were a ragged bunch. Many of us were fishermen, a few of us were poets. All of us were dreamers. And then there were the women. Bias has buried their names. I kept track of the money. That's right, the money. It was just as important for us as it is for you. Where did it come from? Well, it's in your own book. It's just overlooked. Those women who traveled with us, well, there were many of them, and they helped to finance our group. So you may ask, what kind of a wild madman betrays his friend with a kiss? Well, let me tell you, I wasn't so different than the others. I too left my livelihood to follow him, that there are good things to say about Judas. God knows I had more credentials than someone who fished for a living. Didn't take me long to get to the inner circle. Jesus could see my potential, my passion for Israel, my love of adventure. They made me treasurer. I bought the provisions for all of us. I was certainly the best businessman in the bunch. But we're still left with this. How does someone with so much potential, so much promise, sink so low? Money. You always say it's about the money, that every person has their price. And I think to myself how easily one generation smears another with its own sin. 30 pieces of silver, would that be enough for you? And would such a small sum explain my remorse or my suicide? It's hardly enough to buy a slave. And let me tell you, when I held those coins in my hand, they burned my flesh. They seared my conscience. They made me question everything about my life. I tried to give them back. If only evil could be so easily canceled. Pilate was able to cancel his bargain, to wash his hands, but I couldn't abandon mine. I even brought those coins back to the temple, and I threw them on the floor. And they looked at me like I was crazy. They were so appalled at what I'd done, and I just realized to myself, oh, how quickly money changes color. The same funds that bought my deed, as soon as that deed was done, oh, they become blood money, no longer fit for the temple treasury. So money does not explain Judas Iscariot.
Now some people say, oh, resentment fueled by my betrayal. That I was angry at Jesus when he rebuked me because of that woman, the one that used that expensive ointment to anoint his feet. And yes, I thought it should have been sold and the money given to the poor. And yes, he did rebuke me. But I was never rebuked as often as Peter. Some say that since I was the only disciple from the south, the hill country of Judea, that I had different customs, maybe a different accent, that I stood out like a hillbilly at the opera. But let's not forget this. They respected Judas. So resentment? Nothing more than speculation. Others say that I alone knew that it was over. I could tell that Jesus had failed and that the authorities were coming down to crack down on us, to destroy our whole crazy plan. And so in an act of desperation, I threw the whole cause overboard. Cowardice, they say. But come on. Does a coward have the unmitigated gall to do something so unthinkable as to go seek out the temple authorities, to walk into their sanctuary and to sell one's leader? And besides, who was it that dove into the bushes after we arrived? So what explains Judas? Well, some have understood that I was a revolutionary. I wanted to reestablish the integrity of Israel, to cast off Rome, to have our own land again. I was impatient because Jesus seemed to be wasting so much time. All these critical moments to gain popular support and confront Rome were just passing us by. So I wanted to force his hand. He promised us a kingdom, didn't he? I envisioned myself as chief warrior. I was just itching to do unto those Romans what they did unto us. But Jesus did not seek my kind of kingdom. It wasn't from Rome he wanted to save us. Jesus' kingdom was of the heart. He would have saved us from ourselves. So my heart grew bitter. He spends all this time with prostitutes and tax collectors, the pathetic and the maimed. My king goes on soothing minds and healing bodies while the world around us is collapsing. Jesus was the only one who could free us from Rome. And all he had to do was say the word, and we would have been right there with him. But he never did. Anytime it got dangerous, or it looked like someone might get hurt, he backed off. But seriously, how does anything ever change? Finally, I had to take matters into my own hands. Who can explain it, really? Pick a motive, whichever one suits you. They're all slippery. Money, resentment, ethnic distance, that I was a revolutionary. You're always looking for a reason, but reasons seldom explain anything. I stick out like a thorn in the side of your gospel, an ugly element in an otherwise mighty message. So just let it go with this. I represent the capacity that each of us has all of the time to commit evil. What? Are there some of you who hold yourselves morally beyond betrayal? You say to yourselves, oh, I never would have betrayed Jesus. Well, let me tell you, Peter thought that too. I think those that know their own potential for evil are better protected. God save us from the righteous ones in our midst, the ones so convinced of their own goodness. They're the dangerous ones. So please, whenever you worship, say your confession, because possibilities for evil are kissing cousins to prospects for good. And don't pursue knowledge or ask science to deliver you from evil. Science is ethically neutral, and knowledge can only get you so far. I think many of us would admit that the only thing worse than a devil is an educated devil. No. Jesus taught you to pray, "Thy will be done." Lead us not into temptation, but deliver me from evil. That's right. Say me. Forget that polite and vague way we have of saying us. It's me. Anyone with high motive and noble purpose can fall in an instant. Each of us is responsible for our decisions and our choices. We all have the gift and the curse of free will. I know this better than anyone. Now, some of you would probably like to wipe me clear from the record, so that the slate would be cleaned of Judas. When I go into your churches, so often I see stained glass representations of 11 apostles, but seldom the 12. How come? Why? Why leave me out? You can't ignore me. I'm always a part of you. Let this be remembered. God is not mocked. Those 30 pieces of silver, the ones I cast on the floor of the temple, what became of them? Well, they were used to buy a field. A worthless plot of ground that nobody wanted. It was called Hakeldama, which means potter's field. And what was that field used for? To bury paupers, aliens, those with no name, the ones that nobody wanted. How appropriate. The same money that bought my deed was used for a field in which forgotten, discarded, ignored human beings are laid to rest under the auspices of God. Even my end has poetic power and a mighty message. No evil is so perverse as to be utterly beyond God's love. You see, God is not mocked. Not by you, and not by Judas. Amen.
Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Were you there when they laid him in the tomb? Were you there when they laid him in the tomb? Sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there
when from death I'm free, I'll sing on, I'll sing on. And when from death I'm free, I'll sing on. And when from death I'm free, I'll sing and joyful be. And through eternity, I'll sing on, I'll sing on. And through eternity, I'll sing on.
And now may the song and the love of God carry you through these days until we meet again at Easter.